We're back. Welcome to the Relaxed Dog Podcast, the podcast where the dogs are the stars of the show. Welcome to episode 98 of the Relaxed Dog Podcast, sponsored by therelaxeddog.com. Thank you very much for finding this podcast. I am your host, Robert Ober, and I hope that you and your dog are well. My guest this episode is Jesi Kirk, and she is going to tell us all about her Pitbull mix, Boss. So let's get straight into it. Welcome to the Relaxed Dog Podcast. I am here today with Jesi Kirk. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am going fantastically well. So, whereabouts in the world are you?
I am located in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the United States. And we've got some hot weather right now, but I've lived here all of my life, and I really enjoy this area.
Oh, nice. Very nice. And who are we going to talk about today?
We are going to be talking about one of my previous dogs, Boss, who was a rescue pit mix. And he passed away several years ago, but he was just a legend, really, especially in my life.
Absolutely. And they're never truly gone. Never ever.
No.
As per usual, I'm going to ask you to take us back in time to just before you and Boss sort of met and tell us the hows and whys that sort of happened.
Yeah, so I was actually struggling with some severe anxiety and depression, and I was particularly struggling with panic attacks, which if you've ever experienced them, they can be very disruptive to your life. And so I was just sort of in a dark place, and I had this idea that I was going to try to find myself a rescue dog that I could train as a service dog, since I'm a dog trainer. So I went on this mission to start looking for rescued pit bulls, and I met several before I finally met Boss, and I just absolutely fell in love with him. There was a rescue in a small town just outside of the city that I live in, and the lady had fallen ill in the rescue, and so one of her friends was helping to place some of the dogs that she had accumulated. And we set up a meeting. She brought Boss out to my home, and where I have a grooming set up. And the first thing I noticed about him was he was filthy. He had been living on a farm, and when you touched him, I was just rubbing him all over, and my hand was black with dirt. He had some skin allergies. So his ears were very infected, and he had big sores on the sides of his face, underneath his ears. So the groomer in me, as soon as I saw him, I said, "Oh my gosh, can I please give this dog a bath? At least give him a bath." If that's all I do. And I really enjoy the grooming process with dogs. It's a great way to bond with them, and it's something that I've done as a professional for years. And it was just really amazing to see the gratefulness in his eyes and his demeanor as I was bathing him. I remember he had these scabs underneath his ears, and I was carefully trying to clean them. And he just was looking at me with these big, soft eyes, just like, thank you for spoiling me. And the other thing that was very special about him that sort of drew me to him was the rescue worker told me that he was great with other dogs. And they actually had started calling him Big Daddy or Beethoven because of the way he was so sweet with the other puppies in the rescue. And he just had the sweetest soul. I remember at some point when I had him, I had chickens that I was helping to raise, and he was just so gentle with them as well. And he was just a great example of what the pit bull breed can be, because he was very large and very scary to someone that didn't know him, but he just had the sweetest soul. And so that's how we met.
Mhm. And did he already have the name Boss before, or did that come from there?
Yes. So actually, I have a rule as a dog trainer that I prefer one or two syllable names. And so Beethoven and Big Daddy were just not going to work for me. So there is a show on Animal Planet with Shorty Rossi, the name of the show is called Pit Boss. And it's about a little person who runs a pit bull rescue. And he actually has a service dog named Hercules, or Hercules has passed since that time.
Mhm.
But I was a big fan of the show, and Boss and Hercules had very similar markings. So I just thought, man, I have to come up with a name that gives a shout out to the show that helps rescue these awesome pit bulls. And he was so similar to Shorty Rossi's dog. And since the show was called Pit Boss, I thought Boss was the perfect name for him. And it was a B name similar to what they had been calling him. So that's how I came up with the name Boss.
Nice. So do you remember the first couple of weeks and the introduction of Boss coming into your house?
Yes. So again, he was just so gentle. I mean, it was once I observed him with my other dogs, I knew that I had to have him. And it was just amazing to watch, because even though he was a large dog, he was probably about 80 pounds. He was fully aware of his size, and he was very careful around the smaller dogs, and just very sweet. I mean, I caught him cuddling with my smaller dogs, and,
Mhm.
in those first couple of weeks. And it was just amazing to watch, because even my grandmother, when she heard that I was getting this dog, she said to me, "Oh, you do not want to get one of those mean pit bulls. They're
No.
so ferocious and vicious." And I remember the first time she came to visit, I have this awesome picture of him trying to fit in her lap. Basically, the front half of him is in her lap. And I just had to laugh to myself, like, oh, what a big, scary pit bull, right? Like,
Mhm.
he's in your lap and just being sweet as can be. But he eventually ended up getting cancer, which was ultimately why we didn't dive further into the service dog training. And I thought he was much younger than he actually ended up being. But he had mast cell tumors, and then eventually got lymphoma.
Mm.
And when he got lymphoma, it was, of course, very tragic. And we're in a city where there's a vet school. So we went to the vet school, and he did some chemo, but ultimately it did not end up helping him. But that was one of the other amazing things about him. Was I was in a time in my life where I had sort of lost hope when it came to humans.
Mm.
I had a lot of bad interactions with humans, and just really was spending a lot of time with my dogs. And when he got sick, I had to sort of rethink things, because the chemo treatments are very, very expensive for dogs.
Mm.
And I wasn't sure how I was going to afford it, but I had only had him for about 3 years at that point. And I loved him so much that I was not ready to let him go. And he was such a stoic dog. I remember when we would go to the vet school for treatments, it was almost like he was walking the red carpet or
Mhm.
something. I mean, he didn't act like he was at the doctor. He was just like, "Oh, hey, nurses. Hey, give me love. Hello. Yes, I'm here. I'm in the building." And it was just amazing to watch that even though he was sick, he still had that charisma about him
Oh, nice.
when it came to other people and dogs. But we ended up doing a lot of fundraising during that time for his treatment. And that was one of the things that was most inspirational to me. So many people heard about his story and made donations. There's even a local dog bakery that designed a biscuit just for him and sold them to raise money for his treatment. So it was just so beautiful to watch so many people coming together. I was making and selling toys. He wrote thank you cards to everybody that made a donation with his paw print and everything. So it was just such a special thing to witness how this rescue dog that had had such a horrible history could inspire people and bring people together in such a unique way.
They do so many things for us, and yeah, you're right. The influence that an animal has on humans can sometimes it's just so understated.
Yes.
I want to go
and
back a little bit. So when you said you first sort of like brought him in, you had a few other dogs in the house.
Yeah.
What was your existing pack, and how did that interaction sort of go?
Yeah. So at the time, I had an older chow mix named Grace, and she had a tendency to be dog selective or dog reactive. She was very particular about who she wanted to be friends with and who she did not want to be friends with.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, she sort of had this reaction like, whoa, that's a big dog. What are you doing in my house? And he very, very nicely sort of said back to her, like, oh, sorry, I promise I'll be good. I know this is your house, and he just really tiptoed around her at first until he won over her affection. And the smaller dogs, again, that was just, it's unusual to have large dogs and small dogs that can always get along. And so at the time, I had a Chinese crested powder puff that was 12 pounds and a Chinese crested hairless that was 8 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very interesting to take them on walks together and outings and things like that, because people would come up to me and say, oh my gosh, do they get along? They don't fight. And, I would just say, yeah, look at them. They totally get along. But he was just amazing. And because I was a trainer, I had a lot of puppies coming in and out. I remember shortly after I got him, I helped rescue two puppies from a pet store that they considered to be defective because one was deaf and one was blind.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a great sort of uncle to those puppies while they were with me before they went to their forever homes.
Oh, nice.
But I mean, not even just a puppy, but a deaf puppy and a blind puppy. It was just so amazing to watch the way he could change his body language and his demeanor to match the dogs that were around him. But they eventually all became very close friends, sleep together, cuddle together, play together some, but they mostly just slept and cuddled a lot.
So I'm guessing from the sounds of it, they had sort of like a free range inside the house, or?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's always my goal. I have had situations before where we had to do a little bit of what you would call crate and rotate, but he just fell right into place, and that's why I just knew that I had to keep him.
Mm-hmm. And the big question, sleeping arrangements.
Oh, yeah. So he was a big bed hog, and I actually loved it because he was like a human. He would lay in bed and put his head on the pillow and lay just like a human would in bed. And he had the softest, sweetest snores that I love to fall asleep to. But he was just a big cuddly dog. I mean, you could just cuddle with him like a human, wrap your arms around him, and he would just lay there. Um, he was funny because sometimes he would get up on the bed and maybe the small dogs were already there. And Muna, the smallest one, she was the feistiest one. And she would say, "Hey, I'm down here. Don't lay on me. Watch where you put your big butt." And he would just kind of look like, "It's okay. I've got it. I've got it. Like, I'll make sure I don't step on you or lay on you." And so he was just great with them.
Yes. What sort of yard did you have?
So we have a fenced in yard, and they love to sunbathe. They would go out and just lay in the sun. That was one of his favorite things to do. And the other dogs would lay with him in the sun. We lived pretty close to a little shopping center. So we would often take what I would call Netflix dates. Back when you would rent the movies from the Netflix boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So we would walk all the way down to the shopping center, pick up a couple of movies, get some dinner, walk it back home, and have a movie night together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of our favorite things to do. I'd take the dogs down, get the movies, get the food, come back, have a little Netflix and chill night. But we did that. That was one of our favorite things to do a lot.
Oh, no,
I will say that I also had to be careful about, he was a large dog, and because he was a pit bull, he would overheat very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some days that I thought, oh, it's 75, 80 degrees, like perfect day for a walk that he can handle. And he had a tendency to just, when he would get tired, he would just lay down and not move. And I'm a pretty tiny person, so I can't really pick up 80 pounds of dead weight. And there were several times where he would get tired and he would just lay down, and I would just be stranded, basically. And I remember one time we went hiking, and we stopped at PetSmart on the way home to do a little bit of shopping. And he got in the store and he just sprawled out on the tile floor, and I could not get him to move. We were just stuck, and everybody in the store was bringing him water and treats and trying to get him to get up and move. And I knew, like, okay, well, when he's cool and he's rested, like, he'll get up and we can go again.
It'd just be a temporary display for a while.
Yes, exactly. And then it was also, I remember another time we were walking, and when we would approach the shady areas,
Mm-hmm.
he would want to lay down and take a snooze in the shade. And so I was actually trying to avoid the shaded areas so we could quickly make it back home before he would collapse under the shade. So that was a fun little challenge that we had to deal with there. But I just had to be careful with the heat with him. I learned quickly that I had to be careful with that.
Can very much relate to that. We've got a female black Doberman, and quite often when we're out, and when it is a little warm, sometimes she'll plot her course to go from shade spot to shade spot. And
Yes.
have that little sort of like, oh, yep, walk, no, shade. I'll rest here. I'll wait for you to catch up, and then to the next spot.
Yes, exactly.
So how was he on hikes? Did you have any sort of like interesting interactions with any other species?
Not really. I mean, I had to. He was more of a people person, so we would go to the markets a lot and walk around. He loved children as well, but I had a couple of funny outings. He was very into food. He would beg for food. He loved food. I think the dog would have eaten until he exploded if you let him. And so sometimes he would see people with food or he'd want attention, and he would just give out a big woof. And I remember several times we were at the market and he would see someone that he either wanted food or attention from, and he would go up to them and give a big woof. And I remember seeing grown men sort of jump, at his bark. And then I would have to say, like, no, it's okay. He's really sweet. He just wants some attention. but he had a very big bark. He was a very big dog. But with the food, we definitely had some stories there. He was very creative at finding food and getting into food. And I have a big dog food vault. It's like a plastic container that you put the dog food in, and it's got a twisty top that is supposed to be impossible for the dogs to open. Yeah. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this. And not only did I have the food in the food vault, but it was sitting on top of like a dresser. So it was up off the ground. And somehow he jumped up and opened that sucker, and all the food came out, and he ate and ate and ate. And by the time I figured out what he had done, his belly was so distended. He could hardly walk. He just looked like he totally regretted it. And of course, me as the dog mom, I start freaking out. Like, are we going to have an issue? Does he need to go to the vet? Because he was being very lethargic. So we went to the ER vet, and it was late at night. And I remember they told us there would be a little bit of a wait. So I was walking him around as we were waiting for the vet. And eventually he took a big, giant poop. And the vet came out and said, I think he's good. He just don't feed him for a couple of days. Like, he just needs to get all of that out of his system. But another funny, go ahead.
Did the rest of the pups take advantage of that situation when he opened the food?
I don't think so. I mean, they were not the type of dogs that would eat until they got sick. And they probably had, of course, I was not home or not supervising when it happened. And I've seen at the time I didn't have cameras, but now I have cameras, so I can look back on these moments and kind of really see what happened. But I imagine that they probably were like, dude, you're going to get in trouble. Like, I don't think we want anything to do with this. But we had another funny instance with food. One of my other dogs, we used to go to the nursing home to do therapy dog visits. And
excellent.
Sometimes I would make goodie bags for the residents there, and we would take them, a little bag of candy or treats or whatever. So we had these fiber granola bars that I had put in these bags with other little food items for treats. But I remember there were a lot of these granola bars because someone had donated them and thought they would be good snacks for the people at the retirement center. And somehow he, again, unsupervised, got into these granola bars, and he ate them, many of them, with the wrappers. So it was a very interesting couple of weeks after that, because every now and again he would start to vomit, and here would come a granola bar wrapper. And so that happened for several weeks after that incident, and it was very strange. But, he just got into everything. I remember one time I had I was buttering some bread to put in the oven, and I turned around to do something in the kitchen, and I turned back around and the whole loaf was gone. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like, I literally just turned around for a second. Like, how did you do that? Because the whole thing it was like it vanished out of thin air. But he just kind of had this look on his face like, whoa, you left it there.
I usually ask the question a little bit later for you to complete the sentence. I can't believe my dog ate, but I think you've already had a couple of good answers there.
A box of granola bars, a loaf of bread, almost a whole bag of dog food.
Did you have any favorite toys?
He was not. He would play with toys some, but he mostly just loved food and interactions. So the majority of the time that I would see him playing with a toy was usually when there was another dog on the other end of it. He really enjoyed that. And what I do remember, we did an agility class, which was very fun.
Interesting.
Because he was a large dog and older, had never had any type of formal training. But man, would he follow a treat through a tunnel, over a jump, through some weave poles. If there was a treat involved, he would do it. Some of his favorite food, he really liked watermelon. And that was one of his favorites. And so in the summertime, watermelon was a treat that we would share a lot. Ice cream as well. And of course, he got sicker, I let him have whatever he wanted. So if he wanted strawberry cheesecake ice cream, that's what he got.
Nice. That you had to pick a season he enjoyed the most. Do you think he liked the warmer or the cooler weather, or in between?
Probably the fall. We did have some snow a couple of times, which is a rare event around here. But I do remember him having some fun in the snow. But I think he just preferred like the cooler weather, but not quite snow. I remember he had a jacket that I would dress him up in the snow, and he really enjoyed that because he would get the extreme cold and extreme heat were hard for him, but spring, fall, he loved those seasons to go out and walk and meet people and other dogs. He was just very social.
Oh, nice. So you just mentioned the agility. Were there any other sort of dog activities that he sort of like participated in?
Yeah. Agility was the big thing that we did. I don't think he did get his canine good citizen. We did do that. That's always important to me as a dog trainer and owning a pit bull, to help advocate for the breed and educate people that they can be nice dogs and they can be well trained. But that's just basic manners like sit, down, stay, come, heel, that sort of thing. But he really just loved to cuddle and lay around and relax and chill.
How was the reaction from other people that you did agility with, taking a pity?
They loved it. They loved to see a bigger dog doing little bits of agility, and it was definitely fun to watch. I would say that one of the things that amazed me the most about him was he had clearly come from a bad background. When he got sicker and we ended up going to the vet and having imagery done, we discovered that he actually had been shot with birdshot. You could see a spray of lead BBs inside of him. And even on some of his legs, you could feel them. They were right at the surface. So if you petted him, you could feel the BB underneath it. And he also had an ingrown collar at some point, and that's where they keep the collar too tight and it starts to cut into the skin. So it was just really so inspirational to me that he experienced these types of hardships at the hands of other people, but still was such a loving and trusting dog. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that as a dog trainer as well, because we see a lot of animals that are abused that still have some form of PTSD from it. And he never, ever showed any of those signs. And so it was almost kind of a puzzle for me to try to figure out, how could a dog endure some of these hardships and still be so loving and so trusting and so sweet. And I think you just kind of have to, you know, it's similar to people. You know, there are people who go through hardships and some of them really struggle with it. And some of them are able to rise above it and move on from it and
Hmm.
become better, stronger people from it. And I just wonder, you know, anytime you rescue a dog, there's this big gap of time that you don't really know much about. And so I just wish that in some way I could go back in time and see how he worked through some of those things. You know, was it gradual? Were there other people involved that helped him to trust people again? Or did he just see it as, well, the majority of people are good to me? There's just these couple of people that have been bad to me. But that was probably the most mind blowing thing that I tackled with him, because I was aware of the BBs in his legs, and I thought maybe someone had just shot at him with a BB gun. And then when we went to the vet, you could see the spray, and it was like, oh no, like someone really
Mm.
shot him with something a little bit heavier. Um, and I had no clue until I saw the X-ray, and I could see how many of them there were all throughout him. That I think that was when I really realized, like, wow, he came from a really horrible background, and I think that's also why he really enjoyed cuddling and being in bed, because my guess is that he didn't have a home like that before me. He was probably kept outside a lot,
Mm.
and so the bed and cuddling and the couch was just like pure heaven for him.
So, when he was playing with, well, both yourself and the other dogs, what do you think his favourite sort of games would have been?
He really liked tug. And he also liked to roll around in the grass and scratch himself. Rolling around was something that he loved to do. It was not uncommon to see him just laying upside down with his feet in the air, and sometimes he would hold his head back and his lips would fall backwards and you could see all of his teeth. And he was just sort of a goofy dog. Um, and any sort of game that involved food, of course, searching for food, finding food, puzzle toys. If food was involved, he was game for it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned early on he enjoyed the grooming. Did that also extend to things like nails and stuff like that, or?
Yes, actually, he got a lot of compliments on his nails. He would let me Dremel his nails, no problem, which is pretty unusual. And it was funny because people would ask me, like, how do you get his nails so short? How does he let you do that? And I'm like, he just lets me. He just lets me do it. And he did, I think he really enjoyed a lot of the pampering that he got here. He'd probably never experienced a lot of that before. Um, but yeah, sweet boy.
Mm. How was he with water?
Uh, Not a big fan. He didn't have much interest in the water. He just wanted to be near his people, and I'm not a huge swimmer myself, so he didn't delve into water too much. He did go to the beach a couple of times, and he really enjoyed that, mostly because it was a family sort of trip. I extended family would get together. We would rent a beach house, take the dogs,
Mm-hmm.
and he loved that because it was a social environment. But I remember there was another time that my granddad was with us, and Boss was very good at nudging doors, opening doors if he wanted to go somewhere. And so we kept telling my granddad, you know, make sure you lock the screen door. Like when you come back in, you've got to lock the screen door. And I had come back from somewhere and I'd asked my granddad, where is Boss? He's like, I don't know. He's in here somewhere. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's got to be in here somewhere. I'm like, he's a big dog. He's not here. Where is he? And so then we, realized that my granddad had forgotten to latch the door. And immediately I'm like, oh, I know what happened. He's gone on an adventure somewhere. So not long after I realized he was missing, I got a call on my cell phone. Hey, we've got your dog. He's out here just hanging out with us on the beach. We've got a dog. We're eating food. And I was just like, oh, yeah, this is him. And he had he'd gone down the pier to the beach, walked a few houses down, found some people with food and dogs, and he was just hanging out. He was just hanging out. They were, only had nice things to say about him, about how well behaved he was and how he just came trotting up wanting to join the party. But yeah, he did have a little adventure there at the beach that year.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So you mentioned traveling. Where was his spot in the car?
He would typically ride in the hatch of my car. He was such a large dog that he had a hard time staying on the seat. So he was much more comfortable in the back where he could lay down and sort of relax. But he did love car rides. He loved to go places. Sometimes he wasn't very big on jumping into the car. So that, of course, involved me sort of helping him a lot. It was not always easy depending on how tired he was.
Mm-hmm.
But he did really enjoy to go places and visit people, go shopping. He loved to shop. There are a lot of local privately owned pet stores around town, and a lot of them have samples behind the counter.
Yep.
And they love to give the visitors, the doggy visitors, samples. And he figured out very quickly where the sample counter was. And I remember several times we walked in a pet store and I thought we were going to do some shopping. And he just walked right over to the register and laid down in front of them like, samples, please.
I was just going to ask, what do you think his favourite places to visit were? But
food. Anywhere with food. The pet stores were big ones, especially the pet stores that were big on giving treats.
Did he have any sort of like other peculiar habits?
Not that I can think of. I mean, the snoring maybe would have bothered a few people. I don't know very many dogs that snore. And I myself am not a huge fan of snoring, but they were the sweetest, softest snores. It was not like a annoying snore. It was almost like a soothing sort of snore that would kind of help put me to sleep at times. But I always thought that was funny because my father snored very horribly, and so do some other men in the family, and I can't stand it. But the sweet little pit bull snores didn't bother me at all.
To put you on the spot, one of the happiest times that you spent together?
I would say probably the day that I got him back from the vet school, because at the time I thought that we had many years together. And when he got diagnosed with lymphoma, eventually he came down with a really bad fever. And the fever was so bad that he couldn't walk, he couldn't move. I had to have a friend come help me transport him and carry him to the vet school. And we went to ER first, and then we went to the vet school. And it was explained to me that the only thing that would bring him out of this fever and possibly give him a little bit more time was chemo treatment. And I was very hesitant, but I can't express how much I was not ready to say goodbye to this dog. And I feel like he kind of felt the same way, like, hey, we just got started with this great life together and now it's coming to an end. And so he had to spend the night at the vet school. And I was just so incredibly grateful once the fever broke and I knew that he was going to be okay. And that I would have a little bit of extra time with him to just spoil him and love him and spend time with him. And that was a very happy moment for me because I felt like we were almost gifted a second chance or a little bit of extra time together. And that was very, very important for me. And I think it was for him as well.
It's a very, very special.
Yeah.
Having a bigger dog, can you recall some of the more surprising interactions that you've had with people that they've sort of like instantly changed their preconceived ideas about pitties and bigger dogs?
Yes, absolutely. We experience that all of the time. I mean, my grandmother was probably the biggest win we had with people and their preconceived notions about pit bulls and rescue dogs because she was just adamant. I mean, she was your typical older lady who was always watching the news and seeing the stories about the vicious pit bulls that attacked people. And this was the first pit bull that I had ever owned. I eventually went on to rescue two others that were very special to me as well. But she was very, very concerned about this choice that I had made. And I mean, once she met him, it was almost instantaneous that you could see like all of her concerns sort of float away. And routinely, we would be out. Having the little dogs with him was probably one of the biggest eye openers for people to see that, A, he's just walking along with this little 8-pound dog that's his friend.
Just a couple of dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say, routinely because of his size and his loud bark, we would be walking and people would maybe cross over to the other side of the street or act like they were scared. And if the person was open to it, I was always willing to talk with them and tell them a little bit about him. And but the kids were very special. In my experience, pit bulls can be very good with children, and he definitely fit into that category. He was very sweet with children. So a lot of times children would be curious about him because he was so big and he was so cute. And he was just great with them. But he just was loving. I mean, every person that came over to the house, if you sat on my couch, he was going to try to give you special attention, try to crawl in your lap, give you a couple of wet kisses. And everybody just loved him because he was that way. You were not going to enter my house and not be greeted by Boss in a nice, sweet way. And people just loved that about him.
Nice. Do you think when being on the couch and being with people that he was sort of like had an interest in, say, what was on, say, the TV or on the radio, on music or anything like that?
He was not really big into TV. I had another dog that was. She would even watch the Pixar films with animals in them. But he was never very interested in the TV or the radio. His big things were food and attention.
Okay. With the food, what would have been his favorite treat? You can't say everything.
It would be mostly everything, but he really liked freeze-dried raw treats, like the raw patties. He really enjoyed those. Um, I'm not gonna lie, like anytime I had leftover food, he got it. Steak, burger, last couple bites of a burger, a pizza. Um, but I would say that the watermelon and the ice cream were probably his favorites. I would even feed him the watermelon off of a fork, and he would just like open his mouth, like, oh, yes. And he just, I guess it was just the sweet, cool wetness of it that he just really loved. And the ice cream as well. I remember anytime I would finish a Ben and Jerry's carton, he got to lick that carton clean, and maybe there was even some extra in there. So I would say he was a big fan of Ben and Jerry's for sure.
Mm-hmm. I probably should have mentioned or asked a little earlier, but with feeding and multiple dogs in the household, was there a certain method that you used, or?
No. So every dog has their spot where they typically eat. And I never had any issues with resource guarding with any of the dogs that I had during that time. We actually had a lot of deer antlers and elk antlers, and he was a big fan of those as well. And with that set of dogs, I could leave the antlers out and they would just sort of rotate around. Maybe like one would get tired of this one and then want the other one. But he was always very polite. If there was something that he wanted, like an antler that a dog was chewing on that he thought was tastier than the one he had, he would just go and lay down beside the dog and sort of wait until it got up and left the antler for him. So he was very sweet and had good manners with that as well. Despite him being so crazy about food, he did still have his manners with the other dogs.
That's just so nice to hear.
Yeah.
Is there anything else coming to mind that you'd like to share about Boss that I haven't asked?
I mean, I can't stress enough how much these dogs can make great dogs. So that my hope would be that maybe some of the listeners would consider adopting a pit bull themselves. I got really invested into it because I don't know what it's like in your area, but around here, if you go to an animal shelter, probably about 80% of those dogs are going to be pit mixes. And because of the poor reputation that they can have, a lot of times those dogs are overlooked. And they are some of the best dogs that I have ever owned. My rescue pit bulls, which I've had 3 total, were just some of the most special dogs that I've ever owned. And even an adult dog, a lot of times you will see dogs and the dogs that probably need the help the most are dogs that don't get along with other dogs. I see that a lot. Sometimes there are pit bulls up for adoption that cannot be with other dogs. And if you're the type of person that feels like you are an only dog type of person, you just want one dog. I have one of my best friends is that way. Jesi always has 4, 5, 3, and she just wants her one. So if you know you're the type of person that just prefers one dog, giving one of these dogs a chance could be a really great experience for you and the dog. And even with things like leash reactivity, say you were to get one of these dogs that didn't necessarily like other dogs, there are some great positive reinforcement trainers out there that can help you train the dog so that it is less leash reactive. Another one of my pit bulls was that way. And after about a year of solid training and just showing him that he could trust other people and dogs from a distance, he got to the point where I didn't even have to ask him to focus on me. He would see a stranger, another dog, and just look at me and get his treat. So really would love to encourage other people to give this breed rescue pit mix a chance.
Absolutely. So you mentioned in the beginning you were already grooming when you got Boss. Would you say he influenced your career in any way? Were you already doing some training then as well?
Yes, I was already doing some training as well, but I think he did really influence my training because I was able to prove to myself that I could take a rescued pit bull and have a great dog. And so it really sort of boosted my confidence into like, hey, these dogs may have gone through, bad things, but that doesn't mean that they can't be great pets. And the other sort of fun thing that I did with him with regards to grooming is I do a little bit of creative grooming as well. So coloring and carving and things like that. And he had several surgeries to remove the mast cell tumors that kept popping up on him. And so one cute little funny thing that I remember doing is when he would go in for a surgery to have these tumors removed, I would shave them for the vet, and I would shave like a heart over the tumor. So he had all these heart patches on him. So the vet would know where the tumors were. And of course, they might have to shave the heart off to make a bigger space to do the surgery or whatever. But he was he was sort of my test subject for that as well. But it also, I think, brought a little bit of light to the situation because it was very sad that he struggled so much with his health. But it was fun to walk in this dog coming in for surgery with all these giant heart shaved patches all over.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Would you like to give out some information and links on your training and what you're doing now?
Sure, absolutely. The name of my company is called Howling Moon Pet Care, and you can visit our website, which is www.howlingmoonpetcare.com, to read more about the training services that we offer. The thing that's probably going to most interest your listeners, since it's spread out all over the world, is virtual sessions. So I do offer virtual training sessions for people, and I've worked with people all over the U.S. I really enjoy it because it oftentimes presents challenges that I might not necessarily face in my own city. I've worked with people in New York City, in Chicago, where they have like the really cold temperatures, and sometimes you can't take your dog out to potty when you've got these big wind chills and things like that. So I just love getting to know people all over and helping them with their dogs. It's almost like I get to take a mini vacation for an hour on a virtual call sometimes. Yeah.
Jesi, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, I very enjoyed it. Enjoyed it a lot.
Really, really enjoyed hearing all about Boss. I know I can tell people that both our eyes got fairly moist, but we sort of held it together.
Yes.
Absolutely awesome dog. I know he was only with you for a short time, but wow, what a time and to pack that much sort of love into that space.
Yes. He made a huge, huge impact on my life in many, many ways. And I'm incredibly grateful to him for that. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very, very much again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Thank you to our new listeners in Shore in the USA and also in Paris, France. If you'd want to leave a review on whatever platform you are listening on, it would be appreciated. I'd like even more so that if you enjoyed the show, tell someone else about it, and they can also jump in and have a listen to some fantastic and awesome dogs. If you have or know of anyone that has an awesome dog and may be interested in being on the show, drop me a line. Also, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, your dog is family.